I am going to, there you go, good. Good, before I go over these settings, I generally use auto. The only time, as far as noise removal, the only time I might change is like on a night sky image, aurora image, something like that, where I'm seeing that it's just not quite doing what I hoped. So I might go to high, I might try those. And then the only other thing I might do every once in a while, and again, it would be 5% of the time, I might go to high for enhanced sharpness. Recover details, I leave it at its default. And then exposure and clarity, I generally don't touch. I'm going to do that work, or I've already done that work in my Lightroom or Photoshop workflow. I'm going to leave those alone. But if there's nothing wrong with using those, should you want to. I just don't like the clarity slider here either. I prefer precision contrast in their toolbox. So at this point, this image, as far as I'm concerned, only needed AI clear. I would simply go to the top left corner and I would hit accept. And I'm in love with that image. Every time I've only looked at it today. It's the first time I've looked at it, but I adore this image. So let's get rid of that. I'm not going to save that. Let's go here and kind of build on these principles and concepts. Okay, so let's go to the Palouse. And here we go. We've got blacks and whites set the old way. Let's go down. Let's make sure we pick our palette of color. I think on this one, I'm going to prefer Provia. So I pick my film choice. I come in here and there's a big missing pile of data here. So I'm going to pull this over here. Whoops. That's what happens, by the way. I'm glad that happened. If you don't allow this up and down arrow thing, it just creates a point, right? And so that's what's wrong with doing it that way. So you want to come here and pull this over, and I'm going to pull over quite a bit because I don't mind setting beyond black points. By the way, that's a very personal choice, right? I like pulling this beyond a set black point and getting even a little more. But in this image, what I'm noticing is, and the colors look fine to me right at the moment. So let's move, because again, I want to be mindful of time. We're going to right click. We're going to go into Photoshop again. Excuse me. For those who joined late, I'm nursing a crappy cold. So forgive me if I'm not.
Excuse me, John.
Yes.
Somebody has commented that they can still see the meeting being recorded window. Do you see that?
I do not.
And I do not.
I clicked
Richard,
on it.
they have to click it.
Yeah, I just clicked on mine and it went off.
Yeah, you have to click it, say okay or something, and it goes away.
Okay, the person who wrote to me, Lynn.
Got it.
Thanks. Okay.
Good.
Great. Thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yep. Okay, so here we are. We've got a reasonably good looking in the foreground, but we do have haze as we tend to have from Steptoe. So again, I'm going to ignore Lightroom. I just don't like it. And this is what I like so much better. So let's go here. Oh, doggone it. You think I could, that's what having a cold does for me. I just don't think clearly. It's a good thing I keep notes, and I have notes on my right screen here. Okay. So let's kind of talk about philosophy of the steps a little bit here too. Normally, you would always want to do AI clear first because it's addressing noise, and you really want to reduce noise before you do any other type of actions that are going to affect contrast. And that's what they do. Most everything does affect contrast. However, in Topaz Studio 2 versus the original, you used to be able to apply, and now you can't do that. And so it's frustrating. So here's what I recommend. I know I'm going to do AI clear. I'm just not going to do it first. I'm going to do it last. And then I'm going to slide it up to the first. And you'll see that. And the only reason I'm doing that is otherwise, unless you have a super new, M2 computer that they just came out with for the MacBook Pros that are lightning fast, well, then you could use AI clear now because it's going to keep up with that. But if I do it now, you're going to see that blue taskbar going, and then if I go to use Dehaze, which I'm going to, it has to rebuild that every time I move the slider, and it annoys the heck out of me. So I'm going to wait and do it last, but I want to make it the first layer. And so that's another thing to start to understand is when I pick Dehaze, notice it's just like Photoshop. Over here at the top right, I have the base image, that's my background layer, and I have a layer here that I can turn on and off just like Photoshop. And look, I can add a mask just like Photoshop. So let's take a look now. Here's my Dehaze, and it's going to be global. I'm going to bring my strength slider over quite a bit, let it go and let it do its job here. So there we go. Man, that's done a nice job. I just love it when I use the slider. So why do I like it so much better? I like it so much better because I don't see a color shift near as much as I do when I use it in the Adobe ecosystem. I just find that the colors get really awful. Whereas here, yes, it's darkened them and they appear more contrasty. That's what should be happening. But the tonal values have really not shifted at all, even though I pushed it quite a bit. And I might not push it that much, but in all of these demonstrations, I like to push it more than maybe I might, because I know it's easier for you to see that. I would always encourage you with any processing you're doing to be, whatever you do, you might want to back off everything by 10 or 20%, because we tend to overdo things just by human nature, honestly. Okay, so that's all well and good, but what if I wanted to apply that to the background? Well, that's where, if I click on this, the mask, so I went up to the top here and I made the mask active, I can affect where that adjustment is being placed, just like I can in Photoshop. I have a brush, I have a spot or a radial filter, same thing, a grad. I can mask based on color and luminosity, and I can adjust all of these as well. But let's just keep this simple. What I like, again, is that they're giving me in Topaz, and by the way, you can't, like in Lightroom, you can click on anywhere on these lines. You can't in Topaz. You've got to use the square. But at least it tells you where this adjustment is happening. Versus me having to educate you as to the 3 lines in Lightroom, this one's pretty clear. From the red below, nothing is being adjusted. From the green and above, that is receiving 100% of this adjustment I made over here. And then from the red to the green is receiving anywhere from 0 to 100%. And the further I pull them apart, the greater the feather of that graduation is. So really close together might be at the ocean, where you have just ocean and sky, but generally something like this is what I'm looking for, because I want it to feather that. Something else that's going on, which I find to be really clever from Topaz, is you'll notice in the mask over here that you can see part of what's in this area in between. And that's because edge aware is on, and the edge aware is going out there and is saying, hey, let's be careful. Let's choose the edges of these different things that he might not, in my case, or you might not want to be receiving that. I can always go and brush it in if I want to, but it's doing a good job of finding edges. And that would be, on this image, it doesn't honestly matter. But if, again, you had a sky and a land image and you just wanted this to be happening in the sky only, that edge aware is going to do a good job of making sure it's blended in to just the sky and avoid the land. That's what that's doing. So very simply here, I can make this adjustment. Now, if I want to go back, I'll just click on this part of it and it brings my strength tool up. Now I know that that's being applied just in the background, and I'm getting Dehaze to look the way I want, way more than I would ever do. Just, again, teaching principles here and kind of the steps of how you work with this. Now, what else could I do? I'm going to go and show you precision contrast. So I think this could use a little bit of contrast adjustment as well. And at the bottom, there are presets here built in at the very bottom. I simply clicked on the word preset, or I can move these sliders as I wish. So let me give you the preset that I have called John's Start. And when I click on that, I can see its effect right here immediately, and I can feather the opacity on that effect, or I can just apply it right here. And this is generally where I start with this tool. And here's what separates this from a one slider in Lightroom or the Adobe ecosystem, I have 4. And this is why I like it so much. I have micro, low, medium, and high. Generally for landscape photography, excuse me for a minute, I like to bring my micro over to roughly 0.30, the low to 0.2. You notice they're not exactly that, but that's what I would say, 0.3, 0.2, minus 0.1, minus 0.3. Does that mean that's where they're always going to be? No, but I have found through my experience, that's generally a good spot. You know, if I bring micro up, what micro is doing is working on those very fine details. And you can see as I brought that way up, it's almost making it look HDR-ish, but that's because it's working on all those blades of wheat out there, right? So I'm going to be careful. If I bring low up, you'll start to see that it has a different impact than that last one did. It's much more gentle on those finer details, but it is adding contrast, right? Because that's what we're doing here is precision contrast to the darks and the lights here. So that's not as bad or not as aggressive. And why do I bring the mediums, or specifically, why do I bring the highs down here? If I bring the highs way down, you'll notice that it kind of opens up those shadows. Yeah, and so sometimes I'm using it to the negative just to do that. Or sometimes I'm going to bring this over to the right and add even more depth to those shadows. And so let's just bring this one all the way up so you can see the difference. Now this one, compared to bringing that way up to 86, it's almost giving it this flattened look, right? Very different than, let's kind of bring this up to about 30 this side, versus that look. And just to remind you, on micro, it's kind of way in your face, too gaudy looking for me, right? So you can see you have a ton more control over 4 different, let's call them regions of contrast that you're wanting to work on. And to me, that's a big deal. So one more thing. If I open up my histogram, if I notice by using any of these tools that I've blown out my highlights or I've blocked up my shadows, that's where these 3 sliders come into play. This lighting panel is wonderful because it allows me to stay right in this piece of software and say, whoops, I brought those highlights up too much. I'm going to bring those down. I'm going to pull this to the left, and I'm going to recover those highlights that I blew out because I made those contrast adjustments with these 4 sliders. Or whoops, you know, I think I made those shadows a tad bit too contrasty. I can just pull this over to the right and open those shadows up just a little bit if I wanted to do that. Okay, that's kind of how I use that tool. And then I would make AI clear happen. And again, that's going to take more time. It's a good time for me to get my tea. And you can see why I would get.
Oh, sorry.
Say that again. No,
Sorry,
please.
to interrupt. I thought while you were sipping your tea, I'd ask a question. At the very beginning, you mentioned an app that was used to convert JPEG to DNG.
Yes.
What was?
I can let me go back to that. Yep. We can. Let's finish up with this, and we can come back to that.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. Okay. So now AI Clear is my top, over the top right here of the screen. Notice AI Clear is my top layer. I really don't want it to be my top layer. I want it to be the layer above my background or my Photoshop image layer. All you got to do is these little box of, what is that, 6 little dots. If I click on that, it gives me a hand. I pull it down here. I make AI Clear my first adjustment so that anything I'm doing in Dehaze or precision contrast is actually being done at a more, what would be the right word? It's being done on less noise that might have been in that image. And that's a much better place to be. So now I can click anywhere in that image I want to and release. So click is before, after. And again, let's kind of just go like this. We've got the Whitman County Grower Barn. Before looks pretty good. After, holy cow, man, I can see every letter crystal clear on there. And my detail, because of AI Clear specifically, is really making that come out. So that's that's a much more typical way that I would use Studio 2 with all three of those tools. But as I did on that first image, probably 50–60% of my images only get AI clear because that's all I need. But where I need dehaze, I'm going to use it here. Where I need to add clarity, I'm going to use it here. And sometimes that's all I'm doing is AI clear and clarity, or precision contrast here, or AI clear and dehaze. And we'll show you that in a minute. Okay, so I'm not going to accept all that because it'll eat up too much memory. So I'm going to leave that. So denoise to, hang on here. Let's do this. Bring this over here. So your question about JPEG, I don't want that. I want Topaz Labs. There we go. So they have a number of products, and like I said, I couldn't cover all of them, but why is it not showing? I got to go to downloads, all downloads. If you go here, there's a program called JPEG to RAW AI. And without showing you, because it's just going to take too much time, you can get a demo and you can try it. This is going to take any JPEG that you have and convert it into a DNG RAW file with, in fact, AI technology, once again, adding data to that so that you have more data to work with. And now you can use your typical RAW workflow on a RAW file, not a JPEG at that moment. Hopefully that answers that for the moment. Okay, let's go here. Okay, so hopefully you all know that you can do this. You can have an exposure for the foreground and an exposure for the sky, and then you can combine those two images in Lightroom. And if you don't know that, just very quickly, I'm going to use the Command or Control key and click on image number 3 and image number 4. And then I'm just going to right click. And then I'm going to, excuse me, photo merge HDR. I'm not going to do it now. It's going to take too much time. But that's how you do that. And then you get this as a result. And then you can start doing your workflow, right? So I can adjust my tone curve, which it didn't need much here. I suppose I could go over here just a little bit more if I wanted to right now. Yes?
A question related to this came up. Somebody asked how to get back the black point in Lightroom again.
How to get back to the light? In other words,
how to get the black point in Lightroom.
Well, again, the way I don't use these sliders near as much anymore, the black and whites, to set your black and white point. Oh, I think I know what you're asking. Okay. In the tone curve, you've got to go, you can't go to this first one with the S in it. You got to go to the second white one here. I think that's probably was the question. And now I can set my black and white point because I can actually click on these sliders. I suspect that was the question. If it's not, if I'm missing that, please let me know. But I think that's because that's usually what people fail. The default is this one, and you can't click on anything here, right? I can't. Okay. It's weird, right? It's parametric. It's not what you have is sliders, which I really don't want to use right here at all because that's going to confuse the heck out of you right at the moment. Hopefully, Richard, did you get an answer back that that was what they were asking, is how do you get to this little one here? I click on the second one, the white circle, and that gives me the particular tone curve that allows me to make those adjustments.
Yes, I did. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Okay. So now at this point, we've done really what we want to do. I've already done my white balance adjustment on this one. I've pulled my highlights down. I've brought my shadows up. And actually, I wanted to see what clarity would do. So I'm going to get rid of that. And maybe I'll do that again so you can kind of see what it looks like. If I start to push this up, it just looks crunchier to me. I just don't like it as much. So let's go ahead and do the dance again, just to kind of cement the thoughts here. And this one I think will kind of knock your eyeballs out a little bit, as I like to say. Excuse me. All right, sometime today, there we go. Oh, that's interesting. You can see the merge in Photoshop. I mean, in the HDR merge, it left a little witness line on the edge. No big deal. We'll just avoid worrying about that. All right. So certainly there were tools that we had in Lightroom. And if you're a Lightroom fan, you could have stayed there and you can done layer mask. I mean, you know, grad filters there and all that stuff. But once again, I think, you know, this is a good way to show you what the capabilities of this tool are. So let's go to Dehaze right away and see what that does. Pretty dramatic. So before, after, and I'm specifically kind of looking, it was interesting when I was working on images to prepare for you folks, you know, I wanted to look at this mainly for the dehaze that was going out into the atmospheric dehaze that's happening anyways. By the way, might I suggest that you don't always try to get rid of it, because then it sort of doesn't look normal. I mean, there's actually atmospheric haze. It exists in real life. So, you know, here it's looking pretty flat in this area. And in the foreground even a little bit, but by doing dehaze here in Topaz, not only is it helping me in this area here, but there was a bonus. I really liked what it did to the sky, and that's much closer to what I remember the sky feeling like. And I use the word feeling purposefully because I'm not one to process my images to make them what they were all the time. I think I do pretty natural looking processing and not over the top, but I do sometimes make it look like what I felt. I tend to fall into that camp. So I'm actually going to accept that because I don't mind what's happening there in the sky. I did play around with putting a grad in there and only having it on the foreground. You could do a dehaze for the foreground and a dehaze for the sky, and that you're just going to create two layers here. That's all. But I will definitely go in here and use precision contrast on this one. And I'll go down to my preset. I'll hit John start and hit apply. And I know that's going a little quickly, but you folks are smart and you're catching up, I can tell. And now we've done a really nice job on this image in a tool that I think is much more intuitive to use and kind of straightforward to use. Now, might I look at this little bright area here? At that point, I would dump back into Lightroom and or Photoshop and work with some of those tools to maybe work on a more local area. The tools that I'm more interested in are these that I'm speaking to you about. And these are the ones that I literally use in my workflow. So that's that one to kind of cement those ideas. Let's build some more.
John, someone has asked what camera you're using.
A really nice one. I wish I could have all of your voices so I could hear the laughter right now. I am a Fuji shooter. So I'm using either an X-T3 or an X-T2, and I have an infrared camera converted, and that's an X-T2 as well. I don't have an X-T4, that's their new technology. I just am not a big guy who has to run out and buy latest and greatest gear because I'm a firm believer that cameras don't make photographs, people do. And until there's something really intriguing to me, I generally don't run out and buy a camera. These work just fine.
A second question just arrived, not related to that. How do you make the preset in Topaz Studio 2?
Oh, excellent question. And I'm out of there. So let's do that though, because I think that's a valid question. Did I leave? No, I think I got out of that, didn't I? Close the whole thing down. So let's go here, edit in. And this time I'll just, you know what, just to make life easy, I'll just go right to Studio 2 right from Lightroom. Just to show you that you can. Sometime today, let's do it while we're young here, folks. Oop, it's bouncing. I am due for a computer. I'm 5 years new, and I don't know about you, but I'm a loyal Apple guy. And I'm just waiting for that new 27-inch iMac to come along. Okay, so if I went to precision contrast, for instance, and I wanted to set these sliders, I would set these sliders to what John told me or whatever you want them to be, right? And then if I wanted to make that my preset, I would just go, there's a floppy disk up at the top of precision contrast right now. Save these current settings as a preset. So I just click on that and I might call it Linda's start, like mine's called John's start. And you can make a description if you wanted to. You could call this is my precision contrast landscape start points, and maybe have a different one for nature, I'm sorry, bird photography or whatever, right? You can have however many you want to save as a preset. Hopefully that helps. Anything before I get out of here, Richard?
No, thank you.
Good. Cancel out of that. Okay, how much time? Okay, let's do this. Let's start to play a little bit with what I like to refer to as that box of 64 crayons, you know, that cool box of crayons that you get where you act like a little kid with your photography. And I've already done the work on this, and it's a TIFF already. So I'm simply going to go into, and this time, once again, I'll go into Photoshop just because it's my life. Man, once again, I can't believe we're chewed up almost an hour. But I can get through it. I know I can do this. Okay, Command J, I remembered. All right, filter, let's go to studio. Okay, so let's move beyond what we've talked about so far is how do we take what I would call traditional images and use those 3 specific tools that I adore to help us maybe get better results with that type of processing. Well, we can now do something else. And so if we move to below this creative and go to stylistic, this is where the party starts. So the first one that you might consider, because it's just easy and fun, is Smudge. So let's see what Smudge does. I'll pull it way up. I think it's fun. It's a lot of fun, right? So Smudge is kind of cool. And if you like that look, great. I do sometimes, and I use it. But here's how I tend to use it. In this panel on the right side, I certainly have some ability to change the way that strength of Smudge is working by this extent. And I can even sharpen what's going on so that it looks terrible, which is why I generally never use that. But if you want to, that's fine. Remember, this is your vision, and it should look like what you want it to look like, not what somebody else wants it to look like. Okay, but I have an opacity slider and I have blend modes just like Photoshop. So I can start using different blend modes and bring opacities down and get completely different looks that are maybe not so painterly anymore, but are just adding in this great depth of color. So it's not the way Smudge is maybe intended to work, but who cares? When you start to play with that box of crayons, now you have all sorts of other choices. Or just go back to normal. And now I can say, hey, I like Smudge, but you know, it looks a little bit too much like I've applied a filter. I would always suggest at that point to bring your opacity slider down and maybe to 50%. And now if I go before and after, at least it's made all this detail on these petals in the middle kind of go away and made them softer, but I'm not quite sure what John's done. That's a much better place, in my opinion, to take your processing than, oh, cool, he used Smudge. That's not what I want people saying about my photography. But I don't mind them going, oh, that's kind of cool. And then, by the way, you know, you can add a mask. I could get a brush and I can make sure to paint with black. And the way you do it here is by going with this slider. So this goes anywhere between white and black. So I might bring it over a little bit to the gray, so it's acting as like a feather. And then I can paint maybe in this area and say, please don't apply Smudge just to that area, or maybe I don't want Smudge to happen here. And now we talk about crafting images versus just, you know, applying filters. Now I think you'd be hard pressed to know that that's what's happened here. is that I've used Smudge to kind of soften this image a little bit and make it a little more painterly. And maybe I would paint on here as well on the stem so that I'm really just using that smudge in these other areas. Okay, let's throw this one away. I'll just hit the trash can. Let's go to the filter again. And now let's come down here to impression. So what's impression? Impression, and if I go to presets here, is a number of faux painterly looks. So oil painting, and I can click on oil painting, and let's just remember, always watch that blue status bar. And there we go. We got something that looks like an oil paint or a perfect pastel. I like that better. It's a little softer. So once again, right here, I can just bring the opacity down and blend that in with the original image, or I can apply it and I can still do that opacity slider here. So don't worry, you don't have to do it there. But without taking an inordinate amount of time here, we have lots we can do here. So this first part is the different type of brushes. So as I click, you'll see that it's a completely different look that's generated here versus what this brush might do. So trust me, this is like, you know, a box of crayons. I mean, you have all these choices. And then you also have how many strokes do you want it to do? You know, do you want it to do just a medium amount? And that gives you a different look. And then I can make the brush size bigger. And that's going to just give it a minute here, right? And it's really nice and soft, or I make the brush size smaller and it gives it more detail, or I maybe a ton of paint versus just a little bit of paint. And you're becoming kind of a faux artist, if you will. But generally, once again, why do I use these and do I use them? You bet I do. But generally, you're not going to know I did. I use them and then I bring this opacity slider down because I'm just trying to create subtlety. Bring that up just a little bit more. Subtlety in the before and the after. So it is looking painterly. And generally, I'm always going to go in and I'm going to go to the top here, click on my mask, get a brush, you know, start painting in the areas that I didn't want this all to happen. I made a boo-boo there, but that's no problem. I can go back. You get the idea. Again, we're not making perfect pictures here, but we're doing a good job with this impression tool of making it faux painterly for a purpose, not necessarily to, and again, who am I to say, if you like that faux painterly look and you can sell millions of them a year, have at it, right? I have no problem with that whatsoever. Okay, Richard, I'm going to take a breath. Any questions there?
Actually, yes.
Okay.
AI Clear applies noise reduction where it's needed. Does Topaz denoise applying noise reduction to the entire image or only where it's needed as AI Clear does?
Yep. Okay, we'll talk about that coming up. Good question. I tell you what, right on time too. I think you're, no, maybe not quite. It's two questions away. So let's get out of that for a second. Let's do this. It's always nice to have some feedback. How are we doing? Is this resonating? Is it helpful? Of course, people have to unmute to do that, I guess. So it's always hard.
I do have one more question, John.
Please.
A comment. I see you have the Snap Art filter also. How is this different from Snap Art?
Yeah, good question. You know, I was requested to, and I thought about putting it in. I'm a huge fan of Snap Art. So here's how they differ. Snap Art, and let's just do it, right? Because we've got a few minutes. So Snap Art is also a faux painterly program from my friends at, well, it used to be, it's called Exposure Software now. They used to be called Alien Skin, but they're exposure software. And as you'll see here, to me, if you are truly looking for a faux painter program, this one is the best in the business, period. And so they, just like Topaz has, they do have very different categories, oil paint, pastel, right? So you click on these and you can go to detailed. Let's just do detailed in oil paint, and it'll just take a minute here to build that. And that's kind of their oil paint look. I'm a huge fan of the impasto, and I like it in detailed. That might have been the default. And just like Topaz, they do have capabilities to change the photorealism. I kind of like this slider a lot because it brings back the photorealism and takes away some of the painterly look. And again, sorry, it takes a little longer here to render. Right, you still see that. And then what I do like too, the other advantage here is I can go down the bottom and I can go to canvas and I can just rid of the canvas I want to and just make it transparent. And that made that really textury part of this a lot more subtle. And the canvas, basically the canvas is in fact, you know, a real textured canvas versus a smooth canvas. So you have choices of that. So if you really are looking for painterly stuff, I find this particular piece of software the best in the business. But if you're just looking to do some of the other things I was just showing you in blending modes and blending and using it to just kind of enhance an image, I'm perfectly satisfied staying in the Topaz ecosystem. So let's move to something else. Let's go to an image like this that I captured in the Smokies. And then in my mind, I knew I was going to go like this. And then I don't always do this. Oh, file cannot be found. Why? Is this file found? Yeah, it is. Good. So at least I can make that one black and white. Let's make that black and white. Okay, and then I'm going to right click and I'm going to edit this in Photoshop. And I don't always do this with my texture work, but I knew this one, I was going to need something else because there was not enough area. And I knew if I did an inverse of this, I would get something that looked like that. And then I want to just kind of make this even brighter. I just made that brighter and blacker on purpose. You'll see why here in a second. Okay, so I'm just going to flatten that just so we have. So that's what I wanted to start with, and ignore this little bottom right. You know, it's a raw file that I didn't do anything to, right? But what I want to now do is introduce you to another party. Oh my gosh. How many times will I forget? Okay. So now let's go to our add a filter. Let's come down to the bottom right here and let's hit texture. Now this is where it gets really, really fun. I was begging for this piece of software, and I'll take a lot of credit for them finally coming up with it, because I've been associated with Topaz for a long, long time. Did 32 webinars for them when they were doing lots more of those. And I was always begging. There was other tools out there, but nothing that worked quite like this one does. So what do we have? We've got all of these categories that are all showing up, but I can do it by flypaper, which I adore flypaper textures. And so I've gone and purchased those, and then I download those, and I can start to look at what they look like and what the different effects are I'm going to get from those particular textures. Or I can go look at flypaper painterly texture, right? So I've gone in and put, and it's a nice way to look at just specific ones that you're looking at. Or there are different groups too. You can have light leaks and textures, like they have light leak stuff that you can do, and you can add light leaks. I'm not a huge fan of doing that, so I don't tend to use those. So I'm going to go back to all here. I'm going to go back to a category, and I'll go to flypaper. Let's find something. Whoops. Oh, that's when I was showing somebody how to do this. So let's go to something like this. And where the party gets fun is I now have the ability to, there's the entire texture. So I have an opacity slider, right? Or I can have none. And then I also have this. I have the ability to use multiply. And if I use multiply, I can typically bring my opacity way up, and I can start to see the colors coming through in these various textures that I'm using. This one might be even more fun. Okay, so let's just stop for a minute. Remember what I'm in here. Right now, I'm in a tool called texture, and it's just a layer. So if I have something building up too much darkness there, now I can go back to my essential panel, And this time I'll use something I haven't done yet and just use a basic adjustment. And I can just bring the exposure up a little bit on this. So I can stay right within the Topaz ecosystem and make some adjustments. I don't know about you, but I kind of like this, what's happening to this already. And then I can go back to my texture layer. And now let's just explore real quickly what we can do in this texture layer. And by the way, this is going to be, these are in 2 hours, we can only kind of touch base on the basics here. There's about 4 hours of video that you can watch just on texture effects, which is this same program. They took texture effects and baked it into Studio. And so you can go out onto YouTube and look on the Topaz webinars I've done, and you'll have a boatload more information. So here's what's important for you to know. As I slide down below these textures, I now have the ability to affect the brightness or darkness of just the texture. That's very different than what I just did up above. This is just the texture. So these sliders only apply to the texture. When I went up and put in this basic adjustment up top, I was affecting both of those layers. Like it's as if they were flattened and I was affecting the whole image. Same thing here. If I want to affect the detail of just the layer of texture, it's not affecting the trees. It's just the texture. And I can saturate that blue even more if I want to and make it look kind of moody. But here's the real cool trick if you really get into doing texture work. This color strength slider, notice right now, it only says color strength. But as soon as I touch it and pull, oops, I got another slider called color. So now look what I can do. Let's again pull this up way more than I normally would. I'll bring color strength way up. And now look, I can pull my color slider to anywhere I want to pull it. So what makes this really cool, if you haven't got it already, is if I've got a texture that I adore, but I don't like the color, I now can change it. So now I can fall in love with the texture and not have to worry that it's amber or green or blue, because I need to just pull my color strength slider over and then just simply start to find in the whole color spectrum, oh, I'd rather that be closer toward the blue tones or the green tones, right? And as I do that, and as I increase my color strength, I now have created something very different than what that original texture was. So how did I get that? I simply moved color strength off of 0, and it automatically gave me a color wheel, if you will, to change those colors to place them to be whatever I wanted them to be. Okay, so let's finish with that. And then let's I'm going to leave that one there just in case we need to go back. Let's go back to here. So where it also gets fun is we get an image like this. And we can start to play with textures on something like this. And let's just quickly see if we can inspire you to maybe play and have a party with these types of images as well. Excuse me.
A couple of questions, John.
Sure, I'll stop for a minute.
Okay, how do you add your own textures in?
Oh my gosh, it's like I paid you to do that. Okay, and the next one.
And the other question was, can you show how you did the inverse of the tree in Photoshop?
Oh, sure. Yep. Let's do
you.
that first. Can I go back to Photoshop? Yeah. But I can't because I'm using this, but I'll remember. And if I don't, Richard will remind me. Okay. Wait a minute. So the first, oh yeah. How do you add your own textures? Here we go. So notice over here, you have the word texture manager. All you have to do is open that, and here's what you get. You get a list of what you have already, but if I want to add a category, I would just put in there Richard's textures, right? And then I would hit OK, and now I've got Richard's textures, and it's highlighted. Now I would go to import texture, and then I would just go out onto my, where do I have all my textures down here? There should be, where are we? Digital raw files. Shoot, there they are. I knew I just had to read alphabetical. I'm not real good with my alphabet. That's why I'm helping my kindergartner grandchild. Anyways, here's all the different, you can see I'm a flypaperaholic. I got a zillion of them. And all I would do is click on the one I wanted to make. And then I would right click or Command A on a Mac, right? Or I've got to get over here, Command A and select them all. No, I guess I got to shift click. So shift click and get them all. And then I hit open. I'm not going to do that because that will take 5 minutes of time to build all those previews and bring those all in. But once you're done, it'll then come over here, and now you'll be able to go here and say, oh, there's my flypaper painterly set that I just imported. And because I'm a redundant learner, I'm going to do that one more time. Texture manager, open it. Go ahead and create your category, choose import texture, and go find those textures that you downloaded. Shift click all of them, and now you'll have them into the Topaz software forever. Okay, so now I can go there. I do like Two Little Owls, though. I think they have some great textures. They come with it. And I think you can start to see without spending a lot of time how much fun this can start to be. I can make it more textury, less textury. I can go do different things like soft light, and that's going to give me a very different look. And I pull this texture up. I don't have much of it in the sky with soft light. So I go back to multiply. Ooh, I like what multiply is doing a lot. Right. But some of that foreground, I'll worry about that foreground later. I can, if you're more comfortable in Lightroom, there's no reason you can't get to this phase here and then go in either to Photoshop or into Lightroom and start using the tools you like there. And by the way, there's no rule or law. And again, it's not fattening. If I want to go up here and hit texture again, and now I've got 2 layers of texture. So now I can go here, and maybe this time I'm going to go down to flypaper painterly. Maybe I'm going to find something else to add on top of that texture that's already there and add even more texture, right? And now let's go down here and let's check the brightness out. Now we can bring the brightness of just that texture. I can go click on this layer again, and I can work on this layer. So it's just like I'm in Photoshop. Bring the texture up of just that layer. I'm sorry, just the texture that's going on. And once again, just to be redundant again, I have all of these tools still. So if I now want to go to precision contrast and hit John's start, I do that. And now I've added, ooh, that was really nice. Before, whoops, that's doing the whole before and after. So let's turn the layer off here. If I turn that off for a second, and on, boy, that did a nice job of making that look a lot nicer than what it was. But I can open that again, and I can push those sliders maybe even a little more here in the macro and the low, and really start to bring out some of that grungy detail in the sky, and on and on and on. So, we haven't talked a whole lot about all these, but I have curves sitting right here in the studio ecosystem. There's just the basic adjustments, brightness and contrast. I can do some black and white. I just don't use it because I prefer a different way to do black and white processing. But you have HSL and precision detail is just real quickly, because on that one, same type of thing. So precision contrast is much gentler, but if you're really looking to grunge something up, you would then come in here and you've got overall small, medium, and large. So once again, you have control over which size of detail you want to affect. And you can see it's pretty in your face. So I don't tend to use this anymore. There was a day when I did, because I feel like we all go through these phases and we feel these things are cool. And some people use them way better than I do, and they're much more effective in using them. But if you're really looking for details, and then it can even boost that details, you can use the precision detail, and then you have those same lighting capabilities where you can set black points, white points, and adjust things here as you're doing some of that work. All right, affect the highlights and so forth. So that's a real quick overview of some texture work. So Richard, any questions before I exit out of that with texture?
I'm wondering if we should have a 5-minute break, John.
Oh, hey, we're ready for that, aren't we? Yes, let's do that.
Okay. I would just invite everyone to turn your video back on and unmute yourselves. And we'll go
stop sharing for a second. Yeah, so I can see people.
Oh, thank you.
How nice to see human beings.
and then we'll go back into, oops, I should turn my own video on. There we go. We'll go into breakout rooms for 5 minutes only so we can get back to the excitement here. I just want to share a couple of comments. I'm learning tons. Thank you very much. And I absolutely love this. I don't have Topaz, but I'll definitely be purchasing it. So
Good.
People are getting excited about your presentation so far, John.
Thank you.
Okay.
Catherine, she's my barometer. Are we up or down, Catherine? We're doing okay? Good.
Oh, she'll
Big
definitely-
time up and down.
Good. Thank you.
Big time up, I should say. Big time up.
Good. Well, thank you. Okay, everybody get a break if they need a potty or whatever. I'm good. I'm just gonna